games generally like to build anticipation for you by teasing out characters, plot lines, and random events that may be ahead of you. Because of this, generally players will have a good idea of generally where they're going. If, for example, a villain supposedly dies off screen, they're sure to return before the end. When you see a huge enemy in the background, it's only a matter of time before you need to face off with it. If the antagonist's identity is unknown, it'd be crazy to end the story without a jaw-dropping reveal. If these teasers are done correctly, the payoff can be deeply satisfying. However, some games go in the opposite direction, alluding to an upcoming boss battle, conflict, or revelation that actually never comes to fruition. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 9 video game moments we were waiting for that never happened. While we are talking about video game moments that didn't happen, just letting you know that while I talk about things that didn't happen, I will have to talk about things that did, so this is your spoiler warning for the games to follow.
Want to stay safe online and save big? Well, you can. Right now, you can get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 4 months free and up to a $50 Amazon gift card. And all you've got to do is click the link in the description below or on this QR code that should be right down here in this video to get signed up with this great deal right now.
Number 9. Ganon is behind it all. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Save for the god-awful Philips CDI games, Princess Zelda hasn't served as the protagonist of a Legend of Zelda entry, despite the fact that her name is slapped on every title. However, that all changed with The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, where at the start of the game, it seems like Link defeats his pig-headed nemesis Ganon for the umpteenth time, and all is pretty much well. Before he has a moment to celebrate though, the tunic-wearing warrior is sucked into a black void. With Hyrule's go-to hero out of commission, it's up to Zelda to protect the kingdom from the forces of evil. Naturally, all signs are pointing to Ganon being behind the latest calamity. After all, he's the most recurring villain in the series, his ugly mug is on the cover, and you literally saw him in the prologue. But Ganon isn't the final boss. In fact, he doesn't appear in Echoes of Wisdom at all. At the halfway point, it's revealed this Ganon is an imposter created by a primordial evil called Null, who serves as the true antagonist. Although a bunch of players would have half expected that the classic antagonist of the series was going to show up at some point, or at least show up again, he never really does. So I don't know whether that's a good surprise or a bad surprise, but he probably needed a game off. Number 8. Onaga the Dragon King, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. In Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, Earthrealm's champions must duke it out with Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, who intend to take over the realms by using the mummified army of the Dragon King, Onaga. Even though the two sorcerers are the big bads, it was speculated that Onaga would show up since he's constantly mentioned and the plot centers around his unstoppable battalion. Although technically he's pushing up daisies at this point, anyone who's been at all involved with Mortal Kombat or the lore knows that death is pretty much just a standard doesn't get in the way of a good plotline thing. Another reason why it seemed like Onaga would appear was because of his significance. Rather than being a generic baddie, Onaga was Shao Kahn's master and the most powerful emperor to rule over Outworld. Considering this installment has countless challenges and hundreds of secrets to unlock, you'd expect that one of them would involve having the combatants tangle with this horned adversary. Sadly, Onaga doesn't actually feature at all, apart from a single shot in Raiden's end story. Fortunately, Midway learned the error of their ways as they introduced Onaga within the first 5 minutes of the follow-up, Mortal Kombat Deception. Nevertheless, it was weird how Deadly Alliance continuously alluded to the character, having no intention of putting him in the game. Number 7. Cole Phelps publicly exposes the serial killer, LA Noire. In LA Noire, Detective Cole Phelps solves a string of murder cases, similar to the infamous Black Dahlia case. After being promoted to homicide, Phelps is tasked with tracking down the elusive murderer. Over time, Phelps deduces that the serial killer is a twisted bartender called Garrett Mason. After cornering him in the catacombs of a church, Phelps shoots the maniac dead, seemingly closing the case. But rather than receiving praise from his boss, unfortunately, you're told that the identity of this serial killer needs to remain a secret, because he's the half-brother of some government official. Ain't it always the way? Due to Phelps's uncompromising nature, you'd think this would kick off a subplot with the detective blowing the whistle on Mason and uncovering which political figure he's related to. Instead, Phelps drops the case and never attempts to get to the bottom of it. This decision's jarring since Phelps later outs several respected figures as criminals, and when he exposes a citywide conspiracy, it looks like these events are going to tie back to Mason in some way, which would make the plot come full circle. But by the time the credits roll, nothing else is known about Mason, and he never even gets outed as a serial killer. Guess you can't win them all. Number 6. Facing Venet, Final Fantasy XII. Final Fantasy XII follows a young adventurer called Vaan, who allies with sky pirates to take down the diabolical king, Vane. Of course, this is Final Fantasy we're talking about, so it is only a matter of time before this straightforward story turns into a convoluted cosmic saga between good and evil. Sure enough, Vaan eventually learns that Vane is being controlled by an ancient evil entity called Venet, who is, well, trying to take over the world, because of course. Now, puppet masters are a recurring element in Final Fantasy that dates back to the original. More often than not, each entry concludes with the supposed antagonist being discarded in the 11th hour, only for the heroes to fight the one pulling the strings. With Final Fantasy XII continuing that tradition, it was assumed Venet would depose of his pawn during the climax, choosing to challenge Vaan's party himself. But things don't play out that way. Prior to the final battle, Venet endows Vane with his power, turning Vane into a godlike being called the Undying. When he ironically dies, which is very enjoyable, you would again naturally assume that this is going to be the lead up to that actual showdown with Venet. Instead, defeating the Undying destroys Venet, freeing the world from his tyranny. It's nice to know you saved the world, don't get me wrong, but players were really hoping to face off against the mercurial deity directly. Number 5. Fighting Black Mask, Batman Arkham Origins. As the title suggests, Batman Arkham Origins focuses on the Dark Knight's early days as a vigilante. When a crime lord called Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask, places a bounty on Batman, the world's greatest detective finds the world's greatest assassins have come to Gotham hoping to collect the hefty prize. Now, Black Mask might not be super strong or half a crocodile like some of Batman's enemies, but he's the one who put this whole plan into motion, so it kind of stands to reason that he seems to be the main antagonist. But when Batman finally confronts the ruthless rival, he pulls off his mask, revealing him to be none other than the Joker. Switcheroos are nothing new in the Arkham franchise, but you'd safely assume Batman would tussle with the real Black Mask, especially since Roman Sionis is still alive. But once Bat's adventure comes to an end, he's failed to give the skull-obsessed gangster even one beatdown. Beatdown, not murder. Looks like murder, apparently it's not. Number 4. Lady Dimitresque becomes a major antagonist, Resident Evil Village. Even though Resident Evil has a ton of iconic and charismatic baddies, no one quite hit the same as Lady Dimitresque. Probably because everyone thought she was hot. When she debuted in the Resident Evil Village demo, the aristocratic vampire made an instant impression due to her immense height, Lady Deathstrike-like claws, and her curvilicious frame. Not only was Dimitresque expected to be a defining part of Village, it was presumed the voluptuous giantess would be the main villain, considering she showed up in almost every poster and trailer. However, players realized Dimitresque wasn't as high on the pecking order as they assumed, after seeing her serving under another adversary, Mother Miranda, in one of the first sequences. But since the main campaign primarily takes place in Dimitresque's castle, she was still expected to play a pivotal role. That's why it was such a massive disappointment to find out that Dimitresque actually goes by the wayside in the first few hours of the game. And this isn't like Resident Evil 7's Jack Baker, who just keeps returning after supposedly dying over and over. Once Dimitresque is blasted to pieces, she's gone. You do have an impressive boss brawl with her, but still, having Dimitresque killed off so early was definitely a bummer. Number 3. Challenging the Ancients, Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem. Eternal Darkness opens with Alexandra Roivas returning to her grandfather's home after he's been murdered. While investigating his death, Alexandra finds out that her grandfather actually belonged to a sect who is dedicated to destroying, and hold on, it gets a little complicated, I need my script, a great evil summoned by a Roman centurion called Pius Augustus, millennia ago. I know. Depending on the player's choices, Pius will develop an alliance with one of 3 ancients, all of which are different, but all of which I will say wrong. Xel'lotath, Ulyaoth, or Chattur'gha. Though Pius is skilled in the dark arts, his powers are infinitesimal compared to the Masters. For this reason, you kinda expect Alexandra's gonna ultimately square off with one of these unpronounceable deities. But that's not the case. When Alexandra does finally confront Pius, he unleashes his dark deity upon humanity. But what Pius didn't know is Xelatath, Uliath, and Chattanooga have like a rock, paper, scissors system in place, so each of them is noticeably weaker than one and stronger than the other. After entering Pius's lair, Alexandra summons the ancient that Pius's ally is naturally weak against, which destroys them. With Pius untethered to his divine power, Alexandra is able to defeat him. Although it was annoying that Alexandra didn't fight the ancients directly, it's understandable why the developers went in that direction. After all, it'd be kind of difficult to design a battle where you're up against something that's like 1,000 times the size of the protagonist. Though, speaking of which, number 2, battling Malagog, Doom Eternal. Though Doom Eternal was definitely hard, it was a walk in the park compared to the DLC, The Ancient Gods. This time around, the Doomslayer has to go toe-to-toe with Davos the Dark Lord, aka the Devil himself. However, reaching Hell's Ruler is no easy task, since Doomguy needs to contend with a ton of nightmarish beasties, including imps, mancubi, tyrants, and a few new demons like spirits and screeches. At the end of The Ancient Gods Part 1, the Silent Marine is confronted by the largest inhabitant in Hell, Malagog. Even though the icon of sin was gigantic, it's absolutely dwarfed by Malagon, who sits at about a mile high. Although this sequence looks like it's setting up a boss fight, Malagog simply moves our hero to his next destination before anticlimactically scurrying away. Since Malagog is mind-bogglingly huge, first-time players might assume the boss fight with him is being saved for later, so when he shows up before the final battle, players are ready to square off with the living skyscraper. Instead, you beat up a bunch of generic goons while your teammates over on the other side beat up Malagog, which just begs the question why on 2 separate occasions it seemed like you were going to fight this guy, but no. Number 1, winning the war, Free Space 2. In Free Space 2, a galactic war between the GTVA and the NTF is abruptly overshadowed by the return of the powerful Shivans. Upon the collapse of the NTF, it's now up to the GTVA to defeat the extraterrestrial threat. And what makes the Shivans so terrifying is their ultimate superweapon, the Sathana. Basically, this colossal ship is like the Death Star, but without the blatant weakness. To end the war once and for all, the GTVA makes a last stand against this metallic monstrosity. After losing countless soldiers and using up all of their resources, the GTVA emerge victorious by the skin of their teeth. That is until the Shivans summon more Sathanas. Not just a few more, by the way, 80 more, and given you could barely take out one of these things, you'd be hard-pressed to take out a second one, let alone 79 more. Just when it seems like things couldn't get any worse, it's revealed the Shivans intend to perform a kamikaze mission. While the GTVA and the player are still processing this terrifying development, the Sathanas cause the neighboring star to go supernova, obliterating everything in the solar system, including any remaining ships. Though the war is over, it goes without saying that nobody really won.